In the news tonight, the Independent Election Commission opens the door for candidates to register their names for the upcoming parliamentary election with an expected total of 400 lists to compete for the 130 seats. A sense of normalcy returns to the Syrian town of Manbij as residents resume their daily activities after months of siege by Daesh, and Russia and the US discuss how to secure a ceasefire in the country. And a music school in Basra offers children the opportunity to play musical instruments, believing the sound of music can drown out the violence and lead the children to a better state of mind. Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news. Here are the details. His Majesty the King, the Supreme Commander of the Jordan Armed Forces Arab Army, checked on the King Abdullah 3rd Armored Division, where he met with Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mishal Zeben, as well as other high-ranking military officials. His Majesty voiced satisfaction with the level of training and high morale of the division's personnel. Jordan realized early on that the war on terror is not merely a military and security war, but is a battle against mindsets, ideologies and cultures, and that is why initiatives were launched as early as 2004 to promote coexistence and tolerance and to resist division and sectarianism, said Prime Minister Hani al-Mulki. The Prime Minister was speaking at a lecture at the Royal National Defence College, in which he tackled Jordan's fundamentals as well as challenges and achievements. He said in parallel to its military readiness, Jordan has devised a comprehensive plan to conquer terrorism and empower the Jordanian society to remain steadfast against radicalism, reiterating the country's unrelenting position as a moderate and neutral state that is committed to the peaceful values of Islam. Mulki said anyone who has followed the history of the Jordanian administration and its resilience to crisis and challenges would acknowledge a national success story that inspires pride among all Jordanians, again stressing the fact that security and stability are the foundations on which the state can capitalize on its strength and steadfastness. Separately, the Prime Minister highlighted the importance of tourism promotion for Jordan according to a set of measurable goals as part of developing the tourism sector in the kingdom. Mulki spoke during a visit to the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities, where he met with Minister Lina Annab as well as other cabinet members and stakeholders. He said promoting Jordan as a tourist destination is the duty of all, noting that the kingdom enjoys the required infrastructure and contributes to gross national income, however needs creative promotional campaigns. Mulki directed the various industry stakeholders to examine setbacks before taking steps to advance tourism in the kingdom, calling for a review of training programs available to service providers so as to better cater for tourists' needs. Minister Annab briefed the meeting on efforts to promote various tourist programs, including adventure, as well as medical, religious and family-oriented tourism. The Independent Election Commission opened the door for candidates in the upcoming parliamentary election to register their names. Candidates rushed to the IEC offices and other centres across the kingdom at the early hours of the morning to register their lists and sign up their representatives for the election slated for September 20th. Registration will open for 3 days amid expectations of about 400 lists to compete for 130 parliament seats. Under a new electoral law, candidates must be part of lists and cannot run independently, in a move by the government seeking to encourage political parties to forge alliances. Some 106 applications from candidate lists were received until 10:45 a.m., according to IEC spokesperson Jihad al-Momani. More than 5,000 local and international observers have registered to monitor the election, where about 4.2 million people are eligible for voting. A Palestinian teenager was killed and dozens of protesters were injured during clashes with Israeli troops at the Fawad refugee camp in the occupied West Bank. A Hebron hospital official named the dead as Muhammad Abu Hashash, aged 17, and said he was killed by a bullet. An Israeli army statement alleged its troops entered Fawad to search for suspects and weapons and were attacked by local youths who threw concrete blocks, rocks and homemade explosives at them. Soldiers responded with small caliber live fire and rubber bullets and tear gas. Russia is widening its air campaign in Syria, launching for the first time today airstrikes against Daesh positions through its base in Iran. Russia's state-backed Russia 24 channel reported early today that the Kremlin had deployed Tupolev 22 bombers at an airbase near the Iranian city of Hamadan to carry out airstrikes against militants in Syria. The Russian Defense Ministry said its long-range Russian bombers struck a number of targets of Daesh and Nusra Front in Aleppo, Idlib and Deir ez-Zor provinces. The head of Iran's National Security Council was quoted by state news agency IRNA as saying Tehran and Moscow were now sharing facilities to fight terrorism, calling their cooperation strategic. Meanwhile, the United Nations expressed concern for the safety of civilians in Aleppo following reports of heavy fighting in different sectors of the city, including rebel assaults on two government strongholds in the northwest and south. An upsurge of intense fighting around Aleppo has killed scores of Syrians in the past weeks, displaced thousands and cut water and power to up to 2 million people on both sides of the front line. Speaking at a news briefing in Geneva, UN spokeswoman Alessandra Vellucci called on the warring sides to abide by international laws.
The Commission is gravely concerned for the safety of civilians, including a report that 100,000 children living in eastern Aleppo city, where violence has reached new highs in recent weeks as asymmetric warfare intensifies over control of armed group-held neighborhoods and their principal remaining supply lines. The Commission urges the warring parties to conduct themselves in accordance with international law. The Commission emphasizes, however, that the attacks on Aleppo city, even if in accordance with the laws of war, will only further devastate the civilian population.
On the brighter side of the Syria crisis and in the Syrian town of Manbij, a sense of normalcy is returning to residents as they resume their daily activities after months of siege by Daesh. Despite being liberated, city residents said they have a lot of rebuilding to do as many buildings and homes were destroyed. One of the city's residents said people were starved and had been targeted by snipers under Daesh rule. Another market store owner had his stall burnt down. The loss of Manbij, occupied by Daesh since early 2014, is a big blow to the terrorist group, having served as a conduit for the transit of foreign militants and provisions from the Turkish border. In a phone conversation later in the day, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry discussed how to implement the two countries' deal on coordinating action in Syria and securing a ceasefire. The Russian Foreign Ministry said in a statement that the phone call took place at Washington's initiative and focused on the situation in Aleppo as well as how best to implement the Russian-U.S. deal reached during a visit by Kerry to Moscow last month. And regarding Yemen, the United Nations also said it was deeply disturbed by the intensification of airstrikes in the country after an airstrike hit a hospital operated by Médecins Sans Frontières, MSF, in the north of the country. MSF said at least 11 people were killed and 19 wounded in the attack. One of its staff members was among those killed when an aerial bomb hit the hospital compound, also killing 10 patients. A spokesman for the World Health Organization said all remaining patients and staff have been evacuated. The Houthis and their allies in the General People's Congress Party, headed by powerful ex-President Ali Abdullah Saleh, set up a ruling council this month to run the parts of the country they control. Abd Rabbu Mansour Hadi's internationally recognized government and the United Nations have criticized the council set up after UN-backed peace talks in Kuwait collapsed. In business news, U.S. stocks opened lower today with indexes pulling away from record levels after New York Federal Reserve President said an interest rate in September would be possible. The Dow Jones Industrial Average was down 0.24%, the S&P 500 was down 0.31%, and the Nasdaq Composite was down 0.27%. 9 of the 10 major S&P 500 indexes were lower, with the energy sector's 0.63% decline being the biggest. The materials index was the only gainer, rising 0.53% on the back of a weaker dollar. Still in the U.S., tornadoes tore through parts of Indiana, uprooting trees and overturning cars and boats. Fallen trees and branches littered the streets of several residential neighborhoods in the hard-hit area. So far, there have been no reports of injuries. The combination of heavy wind and rain caused flooding in several parts of the state, including South Bend. More flooding is expected as creeks and tributaries start to overflow. A walking tour in Beirut is taking visitors off the beaten path and presenting the Lebanese capital from an alternative perspective away from the tourist traps. Mustafa Fass and Sophie Silos founded what they named the Alternative Tour Beirut after completing a similar tour in Berlin that gave them the inspiration. Their city tour then developed its own identity, taking visitors through the nice and sad corners that echo the stories of Beirut. In the beginning, the tour did not have a fixed fee, and participants would pay as much or as little as they thought the tour was worth. Now the cost is about $16 per person for the 4-hour event. The tour caters to both tourists and locals who enjoy learning about little-known secrets of the city's landmarks.
We don't only take the nice roads saying look at that beautiful balcony or look at that beautiful building. And it is not a historic tour nor an architectural one, but it is an informative tour about the city. We even go to some sad places and the participants of the tour are shocked in a way like, oh, are we really going to pass by here? But at the end of the day, the general idea of this tour is to wish that everyone who takes it will know the city better afterwards and can go around just like any Beiruti or any Lebanese living in Beirut.
And in Iraq, a music school in the city of Basra is offering children the opportunity to learn how to play musical instruments in the hope of distracting them from the country's ongoing violence. Staffed by volunteers, the school gives lessons to children aged between 5 and 16 on various instruments, such as the guitar, piano, and flute. Many of the children have only seen these instruments on TV and are showing willingness to give up playtime to attend music lessons. There are no fees to enter the school, and the only cost is for those who can afford it to purchase their own instruments. Otherwise, the school offers free instruments to the disadvantaged. The man behind the music school is the head of the Faculty of Arts Music Department at the University of Basra. Adnan Sahi believes the sound of music can drown out the violence that has filled the children's lives, leading them to a better state of mind.
Humans in general, and especially children, respond to many factors in their environment, and these factors will have influences on their behavior. So we are trying to move the children from a negative state created by the surrounding environment to a more aware, mature and beautiful state, and get them away from the violence and the exclusive mindset.
Manchester City are poised to sign Barcelona goalkeeper Claudio Bravo once a Spanish side find a replacement. Spanish daily Marca have reported that the Spanish club and Man City had reached an agreement for the 33-year-old goalkeeper to join the Premier League giants for an initial fee of $18.3 million. Bravo made 32 league starts last season to help Barca defend the La Liga crown, but now faces stiff competition from Germany international Marc-Andre ter Stegen Stegen to be the team's first choice keeper. Bravo, who joined Barca from Real Sociedad 2 years ago, is under contract with the La Liga champions until June 2018. Former president of FIFA, João Havelange, has died in Rio de Janeiro hospital at the age 100. The former Olympic swimmer and water polo player for Brazil had been in and out of hospital in recent months with respiratory problems. Havelange was the first non-European to head the International Football Federation FIFA and helped to transform the group and its flagship event, the World Cup, into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. After serving 24 years as head of FIFA, Havelange resigned as its honorary president amid corruption allegations against him and others in 2013. The IOC announced it would lower Brazilian flags today to honor Havelange. And finally, moderate conditions prevail across the kingdom for the rest of tonight. As for tomorrow, a slight drop in temperature is expected, creating fair conditions in Amman and the hilly areas, while it remains hot in the Dead Sea and the Jordan Valley. Winds will be northwesterly moderate, stirring dust in the desert areas. The Gulf of Aqaba can expect high temperatures tomorrow, with northerly moderate winds and slightly high seas. Here now is a look at temperatures forecast for tonight and tomorrow. And to close, here's a reminder of the day's top stories. The Independent Election Commission opens the door for candidates to register their names for the upcoming parliamentary election, with an expected total of 400 lists to compete for the 130 seats. A sense of normalcy returns to the Syrian town of Manbij as residents resume their daily activities after months of siege by Daesh, and Russia and the US discuss how to secure a ceasefire in the country. And a music school in Basra offers children the opportunity to play musical instruments, believing the sound of music can drown out the violence and lead the children to a better state of mind. And with this, we come to the end of this edition of the news. I'm Alia Tuqan. Thank you for joining us and have a good night.